our sector is facing a new crisis. And similar to what has been reported in the healthcare profession, we're facing a new labor crisis. Frontline service providers are leaving their jobs, and who can really blame them? They're burnt out after 24 solid months of this. They've experienced also the increased costs of living that we all have. However, they haven't seen any funding increases. And that's also leading to people leaving the profession in the social services. So many can't afford to stay in the professions that they know and that they love. At a time when we've witnessed a dramatic increase in mental health issues as a result of circumstances due to COVID, we can also expect that the effects will continue well beyond what we define as this pandemic. And as a community, we really need to ask ourselves what happens if and when we no longer have seasoned professionals to support the needs of community members. And community members that are presenting with much more complex and comorbid mental health needs. And this, of course, is layered on top of the backdrop of a fractured healthcare system, which faces many of these same identical issues. In addition to this, nonprofit arts and culture, environmental and recreational organizations play an equally important role, not only in creating a Hamilton where all can participate and enjoy the benefits of our city, but will also help to support healthy well-being and mental health support. The City Enrichment Fund is crucial to the sustainability of many nonprofits in Hamilton. It supports well over 100 organizations and individuals to which provide value to our community. And yet, when we look at the budget that has been so far proposed in terms of operational budget for the City of Hamilton, we see that the City Enrichment Fund is the only line item department that has not received an increase. There is a zero increase that has been slated for the City Enrichment Fund from 2022 to 2024. So it is the only, and it's the only department that we see that. City Enrichment Fund is not a significantly large department. I mean, it does represent over $6 million, but it is the third smallest of all line items in our operational budget. So certainly one of the concerns and one of the things we wanted to bring to the attention of council as they deliberate on this budget and looking at what they will approve is the need to approve an increase in the City Enrichment Fund. These are the organizations that are helping those that are often underrepresented in our community. We also wanted to acknowledge that, moving forward, the city is looking at adopting just recovery principles around applying an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens to the granting process in the upcoming year. If this is done, this will certainly support organizations who are assisting and supporting equity-seeking groups in the community and will ensure greater accessibility for underserved populations. But of course, this can only be done as if funds increase in the budget over the next few years. And we're really hoping that the city will consider that as they look to the budget next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Next up, we have Tom Cooper from the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction.
Hey, Kojo, thanks very much. Good to see everybody. And this week, as many of you know, we launched a new idea here in Hamilton. It's a community idea to build a small community of tiny cabins to try to respond to what we have seen as the deplorable housing and homelessness crisis we've been faced with in our city for the last few years. We know too many people are living rough in tent encampments or trying to survive in the recesses of buildings or in alleys. The Hamilton Alliance for Tiny Shelters was founded as a temporary solution by community members who want to do something about this desperate emergency. So we were very pleased earlier this week when the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board approved the idea of utilizing the former Sir John A. Macdonald High School property as a potential site for this tiny cabin community to really support people who are living rough in the community, who may not be able to access traditional shelters for a variety of reasons, whether due to high acuities or because they want to stay together as a couple, or maybe even just because they have a pet and they don't want to part with their friend, and aren't allowed into traditional shelters or hotel spaces as a result of that. So again, I want to emphasize this is a temporary solution. Nobody wants to make this an institutionalized part of our community, but we really do see this as a response to what we have seen as an unacceptable situation, not only here in Hamilton, but right across Canada. And we're seeing communities from Kitchener-Waterloo, where we've modeled this idea from, to London, to Oshawa, Kingston, Vancouver, Halifax, are all experimenting with this idea of tiny cabin communities. It brings together wraparound supports that may already exist, and in our case do certainly exist, from some fabulous organizations who have been doing outstanding work supporting our unhoused population in Hamilton. So this afternoon, actually, we are going to be presenting to the Emergency and Community Services Committee and requesting council get behind this idea. Certainly the fact that the Board of Education has provided a site lease, is able to lease it to us rent-free, and for up to a year, and maybe a little bit longer, depending on their needs with the building. So we really think this is an optimal site for this community of tiny cabins to get started. We'll start out with about 10 and then move up to 20, but we'll also look for alternative sites down the road for the time when we're no longer able to use the Sir John A. Macdonald High School field. This site, there's been a little bit of community pushback, wondering if it is the best site, but it is close to community services in the downtown. It is a wide field with green space, and it would be close to be able to support those individuals who would live at the tiny cabin community. We don't want to hide away our homelessness crisis in Hamilton. I think we want to embrace it. We want to come together as a community to show what can be done if we work together. And so I'm very pleased with the incredible community support we've seen just in the last few days from all quarters of the community, offering to help in various and innumerable ways on this project. So we'll be looking for council's support for this idea, and certainly thank the Just Recovery Coalition for their wonderful support and ongoing assistance to help so many vulnerable members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next up, we have Carl Andrus from the Hamilton Community Benefits Network.
Thank you so much, Kojo. I appreciate it. So COVID is far from over. So for those members of the Just Recovery Coalition that are still on the front lines, having to deal with daily challenges of this pandemic, it's not over. It hasn't ended. So I wanted to spend some time to talk a little bit about the Hamilton Community Benefits Network survey and what we're doing to look forward to a brighter future post-pandemic. But at first, I have to really highlight some of the work that's going on. Tom talking a little bit about the Tiny Shelters program is an excellent opportunity of what's come from the Just Recovery Coalition. We meet almost every week. And we're able to exchange and co-support each other on a variety of amazing projects. So I wanted to talk a bit about the tiny huts and say that the HCBN is completely behind that, but I also wanted to talk about the City Enrichment Fund, as Kim mentioned in her speech, and talking about asking the city to find more funds from the levy to support the good work that's going on in community. There's a pile of work that's going on in the community, right down to garbage collections in local neighborhoods and the building of community gardens to higher ideas that are ending homelessness, like the tiny shelters solution, or at least providing a step forward for that. And as we look forward to a post-pandemic world, and HCBN will be launching a survey, which I notified you guys about, so feel free to check that out. We really need to start looking at how we can do things differently. And some of the power of the Just Recovery Coalition has just been in putting all of these people together to talk about these amazing opportunities. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Carl. Next up, we have Linda Lukasik from Environment Hamilton.
Thanks, Kojo. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. And Environment Hamilton, I want to say, is a proud member of the Just Recovery Hamilton Coalition. It's a really effective group, and it's always it's a powerful bringing together of organizations and efforts. So today I'm going to be speaking to key active transportation and public transit elements of the 2022 budget. And I want to really emphasize that these are elements that are really key, not only to building a climate resilient city that we talk about a lot at Environment Hamilton, but one that is inclusive. Just recovery must include mobility justice, and that means easy access to reliable, affordable transportation. So the first piece that I want to speak to very quickly is Hamilton Bike Share. And I want to point out that in November of 2021, the mayor and council unanimously supported a motion to direct staff to report back on how the municipality could, quote, effectively and efficiently provide financial sustainability for the Hamilton Bike Share program. Well, that staff report is on the February 10th GIC budget meeting agenda, and staff are recommending approximately $500,000 in municipal funding to sustain the current bike share system. And our message is that this recommendation really must be supported. Our bike share system has to be viewed as an integral part of our local public transportation network. And we need to ultimately move beyond simply sustaining the system, but expanding it into more areas of the city. Bike share is a financially accessible, climate resilient, active transportation system that is an essential component of Hamilton's climate resilient, inclusive future. It's a key piece of mobility justice. Well, I also want to speak to public transit and the HSR. Our public transit system is only going to become more and more essential as time goes by. While the system has had its challenges during the pandemic, the municipality really has to stay the course and continue to invest in system enhancement and expansion. And on this front, the 2022 transit budget recommendation from city staff really does set us on the right course. Transit staff are recommending full funding for year 6 of Hamilton's 10-year transit strategy. We know we've lost a few years because of the pandemic and other challenges with that 10-year transit strategy. But this year 6 funding is a good thing. The budget will support replacing 18 buses and bringing 14 new buses into the fleet. We're going to see transit route improvements that'll be made as a result of new investments. And the interesting thing here to note is that some of these improvements are starting to take into account public feedback that the HSR has gathered through survey work, and we really applaud the HSR for this approach. Responding to public feedback on public transit is critically important for ensuring routes reflect the needs of those who depend on public transit to move around our city. And we hope this approach will also encourage modal shifts away from private vehicles too. If we have routes that are more responsive to community needs, we hope that'll help on that front. All of the new buses being acquired by the HSR are going to be operated using compressed natural gas. So that's still a fossil fuel, but certainly better than diesel fuel. And we would just say here, the municipality must continue to make that transition to electric buses a priority moving forward. The climate emergency really demands it. So a reliable public transit system with frequent service that offers comprehensive coverage across the city is what our municipality really must continue to invest in. And that's not only to facilitate effective pandemic recovery, but to really position our municipality well to weather even bigger storms like the climate emergency. And so we urge Hamilton City Council to support the 2022 transit budget. It is going to contribute to building that climate resilient, inclusive future for Hamilton that all of us at Just Recovery know we really need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. And I think next up, maybe Violetta will say a few words.
Yes, thank you so much, Kojo. YWCA Hamilton is honored to be here speaking with you today with my colleagues on the Just Recovery Coalition to ask the City of Hamilton to respond to the many needs facing our fellow community members. We need a bold, brave, and barrier-free investment in housing, capital spending for public amenities, consultation with marginalized communities, and creative solutions to systemic and ongoing issues. The capital spending that is being proposed on housing initiatives, roads, bridges, traffic, sidewalk infrastructure, long-term care, and recreation facilities, amongst other spending, must include an intersectional gender analysis that is conducted by women, girls, and non-binary people. When budgets are analyzed with women, girls, and community in mind, the potential outcome look like evaluating and changing sign-up procedures for city recreation programs to ensure that they are equitable and can address barriers for things such as registration times and the necessity for high-speed internet access. It looks like insight on how transit stops can be designed with mobility devices, strollers, and social distancing in mind. It looks like doing a critical analysis after severe snowstorms like we just experienced and asking how we can do better to ensure that no one is stranded outside, no one is found unable to use sidewalks, and no one is left unsheltered. After the few bouts of incredible snow, freezing rain, and extended freezing weather that we've just experienced, it's imperative for us to urgently think about how as a community we respond to the needs of people navigating through sometimes unforgiving Canadian winters. Each night, individuals of all genders are trying to find respite from the cold to survive. The number of individuals experiencing housing precarity or homelessness has not decreased. The number only continues to rise with the unaffordability crisis in the real estate market and private rental market. The sectors serving women and gender diverse peoples meet weekly and desperately are trying to coordinate space that is literally not found. There's not a space left that's unoccupied. We continue to have women and children sleeping in offices, curled up in chairs, sitting in the waiting areas for hours. Women arrive with injuries, partially clothed, unclothed for the winter, and terrified. We call shelters around the province trying to find space, but the story is the same. Everyone is full and they can't take anyone in because of the COVID protocols. We are desperate, out of options, and the cold is here. Outbreaks throughout the sector have made the work almost impossible. It is exhausting on service users, staff, and this is not sustainable for our sector or our city. We need more core investments in permanent housing and supportive housing that meets the needs of people who are seeking refuge in our beds year after year. All solutions need to be considered through a gendered lens. Otherwise, we will continue to find a growing number of women left out in the cold. Leaving women without a safe place to go while we work on longer-term permanent housing solutions is an unacceptable response. In our Just Recovery report and document, we outline the importance for this analysis and the importance of some of the key recommendations we've put forward for the budget. According to the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network, approximately 700 women and 236 accompanying children are turned away from domestic violence shelters across Canada each day. Here in Hamilton, our shelter system is over capacity, particularly for women and non-binary people. A recent city report showed that shelters serving women, transgender people, and non-binary adults have remained at full or over capacity since 2018. Women are at a much higher risk of violence if they are experiencing homelessness. In fact, according to the reports on the state of women's homelessness in Canada, many women and gender diverse peoples feel safer remaining in violent or exploitative relationships than they do on the street or in a shelter because they face violence from not only one man, rather from many, when having to navigate those sectors. Since women and gender diverse people have also been hesitant to call for help from shelters because they are concerned about COVID-19 and capacity limitations, even more individuals are isolated in their homes and may be experiencing violence. We know that pandemics and epidemics increase violence at home. The pandemic has exacerbated the need for critical and crucial supports for women, gender diverse folks, and children. It is imperative that the City of Hamilton provide adequate, sustainable funding to organizations addressing violence against women, gender-based violence, and supporting survivors. No individual at home should wonder whether or not they can call and access help. They should never be concerned about whether or not there will be space at a violence against women shelter. That is currently the predicament in Hamilton and has to be addressed. YWCA Hamilton, echoing the sentiments made by our colleagues, urge you to develop a clear, transparent equity strategy to critically evaluate budget allocations and priorities. Other municipalities in Canada have made these commitments. We cannot let the ambitious city lag behind.
Thank you, Violetta from the YWCA. um, I would also like to acknowledge some of our coalition members that are here. They don't have they're not speaking today, but they are here. We have the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce here. We also have United Way Halton and Hamilton, and we have Acorn Hamilton. There are other members of the coalition that couldn't make it. The Disability Justice Network of Ontario, the Sexual Assault Center, Hamilton and area, the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic, and so they had other other things to do, so they couldn't make it today. So just to wrap everything up, and then we'll open it up to some questions from the media. Our main purpose again is to ask the city to start looking at just recovery principles as they make these budget deliberations. People have been historically marginalized. We presented them with over 150 recommendations. Some of those recommendations have been adopted, others haven't been. So we will continue to speak to the importance of adopting some of these recommendations. The discussion about the City Enrichment Fund, funding for indigenous communities and organizations here in Hamilton, restructuring the Board of Health, providing American Sign Language services and captioning to all city services, providing closed captioning to all of City of Hamilton video streams and recording. Those are some of the things that I think can be done, and we will continue to do this work. And we are also hoping that residents will also be engaged. And we hope to see residents on February the 7th speaking to some of these issues and issues that they may be facing in their neighborhoods. Would also finally like to thank Environment Hamilton, Acorn Hamilton, and the Community Benefits Network for hosting a training session yesterday that had residents come in to learn more about the budget and to also train residents on how to delegate. So we'll end it there, and then if there are any questions from the media, we'll take them, and depending on what the question is, I might funnel it to one of the organizations. So are there any questions from the media? And if you have questions, just tell us which media, and then we'll continue. Justin.
Hey there. So I'm with tvo.org, and I'm wondering, Kim mentioned that a lot of people are maybe either leaving the social services profession or there's some difficulty staffing, which is something that I've heard about before from other people. And I'm wondering if any of your organizations are finding at this point that it's difficult to continue your programming because of that issue.
Kim?
I've certainly heard from a number of executive directors in Hamilton, as well as just anecdotally that yes, that is the case. Our organization is a social planning and research council. We don't provide, we typically don't provide a lot of direct service. So I'll leave that to maybe some of the people on this call who are providing some direct service to maybe comment on their experience.
Are there any organizations that want to speak to that? Violetta?
At the beginning of the pandemic, there was an interesting conversation that happened socially about essential services and what are essential services. And some essential services were acknowledged, and some of those received very temporary and very small top-ups, either from different levels of government. But more often than not, they were tremendously temporary and had already expired, and the pandemic hadn't waned by that point. It continues on now 2 years onward, and we don't know when that will conclude. So there's a lot of essential services that were also not acknowledged under those top-ups or those additional pandemic pay incentive programs. And not all employees, of course, or all individuals are incentivized to do that, but it at the very least helped to acknowledge the important and difficult work that they were doing day in and day out, coming to serve their communities in tremendously frightful times back when we didn't know enough about the pandemic. We didn't know the things that we know today, but even now with Omicron, how unbelievably infectious it is. It's still very frightful for a lot of individuals to come into work, but they do. They come in every single day to serve their community in a whole host of different ways, including shelter work, long-term care, grocery stores, transportation. And so to ensure that we are able to compensate them accordingly for the difficult work that they do is important. Nonprofits struggle, of course, because their funding comes from levels of government and are oftentimes unable to meet the rates that they wish that they could compensate their employees with, but it's imperative that we have governments to compensate that. So that's one of the reasons. And for a lot of organizations, they are employing individuals who never predicted, no one goes into retail or to work at a grocery store or shelter, presuming that they're going to have to work in a pandemic for this extended period of time. So it's understandable that the burnout is very much apparent there. And especially this past month of January was unbelievable for almost any sector that I have come across. It has been absolutely very, very difficult. So it's most certainly a trend and one that we have to address and can do so with emergency funding and investments.
Justin, are you okay with that response?
Yes, thank you. I do have another question.
Sure.
I'm wondering, I know everybody here, all the organizations, everyone has specific but also overlapping priorities. And I'm wondering, just as far as lobbying the city and trying to push during this budget time, are there any maybe joint priorities or things that you collectively would really like to see happen?
Would anyone like to take that?
So there's kind of two focuses, I think, that every Just Recovery member can agree on their principles. And that's, of course, the city investing more local resources into housing. And of course, that topping up the city enrichment fund that we've all talked about here is just to say, hey, can you provide some more available cash flow to frontline organizations doing the hard work right now, because they're struggling for those funds. So I would say of two Just Recovery principles, the right to housing, and then just making sure that that cash flow is available to organizations doing frontline services.
Any other organization wants to add to that? Okay, good. Any other questions?
I'm all good there. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, next up we have Jessica Maxwell.
Hi there, folks. I'm here with CBC Hamilton today. I just wanted to ask how the coalition plans to have a different response this year from the city, and how you plan to respond to hesitation from the city.
Okay, anyone want to take anyone want to take that? Okay. Oh, okay, Linda.
Yeah,
Linda.
I can start and hopefully others can chime in. I think I know that we've got organizational representatives delegating on budget day. So that's certainly part of what we're collectively doing as Just Recovery Hamilton and identifying ourselves as organizations involved with the point there being to emphasize to counselors that there's a collective of us that's come together that's talking about these issues, that understands how all of these issues interact and how we need a very holistic approach to addressing challenges in our community. So I know we've done that in previous delegation days, and I know we'll continue again. And I think I would add, I mean, maybe as a note of optimism here, just in terms of how the city is consulting on budget. We did have an additional session in November of last year, early on in the budget discussions, where community could delegate, and we certainly took advantage of Just Recovery Hamilton there. So I like to think that, you know, maybe it's partly because we exist now and we're all pushing collectively for better process, better community engagement. And obviously, we're all very committed and passionate about seeing better budget outcomes. So I would say to you, we'll continue to do that and stay tuned, because we're not going away. And I think, if anything, we're all talking more and more about other ways that we can be pushing for change when it comes to how the city talks about budget and how the city allocates our municipal dollars for making the community better.
I'll just add to that, Linda. Thanks. That I think that also Just Recovery is a resource for the city of Hamilton, and so our interests, you know, in many ways are the same. We all want a Hamilton that everyone can participate in, where there's equity, where there's inclusion, and I think one of the strengths that we bring to the city is that the organizations that are around this table have a collective network that reaches into the grassroots community. And that's really important for our city council, because we have those connections and we can speak to some of the issues on the ground that they may not be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's a strength. So I really see that our role is to both challenge and support. And to work with the city of Hamilton in terms of some higher level advocacy that can be done at a provincial or federal level as well. Childcare is certainly one of the issues that, you know, we've talked about, not only as a collective but also with representatives from the city, and we know that that's also a keen interest to be able to secure affordable childcare for people in Hamilton and of course in Ontario. So I think moving forward as well, we want to ensure that the Just Recovery Coalition is there to be that voice and to offer the support that we have through our networks and to challenge and support the city and its initiatives.
Thank you very much, ladies.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, if there are no questions, we'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. And a big thanks to all the coalition members, for residents of Hamilton that are tuning in, watching this. If we encourage you to delegate on February the 7th, Monday at 3 o'clock. If you want to delegate, you have to sign up to delegate, and I believe the deadline is tomorrow at noon. So we will, if the link we'll be sharing on our social media platforms, and you can also connect with all of the organizations that have spoken here today. I believe all of them are delegating or are sending some form of correspondence to city hall around the importance of listening to residents and taking a just recovery process into developing the budget. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we hope to see you all on Monday. If you have any questions, you can reach out to any of the organizations. And again, we have Environment Hamilton, Social Planning and Research Council, the Hamilton Community Benefits Network, YWCA, United Way Halton Hamilton, the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and Acorn Hamilton. There are other organizations that couldn't make it today: the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic, the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, Sexual Assault Center, Hamilton, and area. And I probably missed someone. It always happens, but our network is growing, and if there are any other organizations too that want to participate or join the coalition, you can always reach out to us. Yes, and I definitely miss the Hamilton Area and District Labor Council. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Kojo.
Yes, thank you, Kojo.
Jordan.
Yep, I'm here. I just ended the stream just a couple seconds ago.
Oh.
Yeah, it looks like everything went well. I'm just gonna, you can